yet. Looks like it's going. Okay, great. So thank you for that. So ASCM will then send the results back to the chapter, to me or John or info, and we'll get those results. We'll take a quick look, and then we'll set up some time with you to digest, to go through the results and help coach through what does that mean? What does that look like? You know, we can go as deep or kind of keep it as high level. And then from there, we can also help you customize what is going to make the most sense for you and your team in terms of improving your maturity or your performance in that journey. And it's all supposed to be customized to what you need and not just fitting you into, you know, a standard template, but let's make that what is the most important to you. And so John and I can help facilitate that discussion. We can bring in Nisha and Fernanda if needed, and we'll go from there. So that's really the process. We just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. Again, I will update this and we can share the slides with you guys. For anyone watching the recording, this should be info@twincities.ascm.org. I mistyped it, org. Okay, before I get in and start, we're going to start with Nisha. Any questions before we move into Nisha's presentation? All right, so Nisha, we should be seeing your presentation here, and I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Emily. I'm Nisha Shah. I'm the transformation architect at ASCM, and that basically means I deal with all things related to SCOR. And that includes our SCOR-based assessments. So today I'm going to talk about the supply chain maturity assessment. This assessment really draws from an experience base of using SCOR quite frequently in my previous job, which was at Boeing. I spent about 17 years at Boeing and led the rollout of the SCOR framework there. We did 12 SCOR trainings across the enterprise, and we did 5 SCOR-based transformation learning programs. So really a very holistic effort to embed SCOR into the supply chain there. So that's a little bit about me, and I was the main architect for the maturity assessment, which is what we're going to talk about today in the first part of this webinar. So with that, if we can go ahead. All right, so really excited to talk about the maturity assessment. A little bit of background here. This assessment, first off, it is a free assessment. The intent for this is to kind of be at the quick and dirty analysis level. Let's say that we want to start our supply chain transformation journey, and we want to really identify the areas within our supply chain where we should focus our efforts. That's what this assessment is intended to do. It's not going to get into deep analytics. This is a fully qualitative assessment. So quick and dirty, where do I need to focus? Where do I need to do more analysis? That's essentially what this assessment is. The scope is the end-to-end supply chain. And I think that's super important because in this assessment, we do consider plan, source, order, all the way through fulfillment, as well as supply chain orchestration. And that orchestration piece is super important because I know, as many of you know, sometimes our core supply chain processes may be good, but the orchestration of those processes across the business and with our customers and suppliers is where things break down. So we also look at that in the context of this assessment. As Emily mentioned, there is a formal output briefing, and the chapter will provide that to any organization that takes this assessment. So first off, I know we talked about SCOR and that this is a SCOR-based assessment. I want to talk a little bit about what that means as well. So we'll get into some of the details of what's in the SCOR model and how this assessment relates to that.
That's great. Thank you, Nisha. I was going to ask that if you can give a little bit more context to SCOR. I think that would help.
So,
Awesome.
why don't we talk a little bit about SCOR before we get into this slide? So
Okay.
I guess let's do a quick poll here. Is everyone familiar with the SCOR framework? Do we know what SCOR is, or is there anyone that wants to admit that they're not familiar with it, which is okay? All right.
Good job, Grayson. I'm proud of you for that.
Yes, thank you. No, this is you're giving me my lead in, right? And Emily, if you wouldn't mind adding to the chat score.ascm.org, that is the website. The SCOR framework is free. It's open source. Anyone can go access it, and it really is the comprehensive framework for supply chain. So what it contains is a set of processes for supply chain, a set of best practices for supply chain, a set of skills associated with supply chain, and a set of metrics associated with supply chain. So this is created with an industry, academia, forum collaboration. It's continuously updated, and it really is the framework for supply chain. So I would recommend that you go to the website. There's actually a free training on SCOR on that specific website, score.ascm.org. So really recommend you get familiar with the framework, because that's where we're getting the areas that we're assessing, right? So in one of these slides, I'll show you the areas that get assessed, and there's actually a reference back to the SCOR model to see where in the SCOR model this comes from. Emily, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know you mentioned Boeing, and you guys did a lot with SCOR in Boeing. We did a lot with SCOR in Cargill also. It was Cargill likes to Cargillize everything, but they had create, which represented the R&D function, and then the rest of it at the time, this was 10 years ago when I was involved in it, was the plan, source, make, deliver, right? I hadn't seen it at Cargill with the order and the orchestrate and the fulfill and return and transform, all those pieces, but certainly the entire kind of Cargill structure was built around create, plan, source, make, deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, definitely encourage you to take a look at SCOR. And if you're interested in learning more about SCOR, also talk to Emily, talk to the chapter. There are more in-depth trainings around SCOR as well. So a little bit more around the purpose. So from an ASCM perspective, we thought it was important to offer this and to offer it for free, because it is a really good way for organizations to get started. And I say organizations because we've actually had nonprofits use the maturity assessment as well. So it isn't always just for-profit companies. Basically, any organization with a supply chain could use this assessment to really understand where are the areas that you can really focus on for greater improvement. The what's in it for us from an ASCM perspective, this is business development. Certainly it gives us some insight into the companies that are being evaluated. It also helps us develop a voice of record. So this is an important one. So the results that come out of the maturity assessment, we are collecting that data. And eventually where we want to be able to go is to provide a benchmark. We want to be able to also provide additional pieces of research around trends, around how maturity is different across different industry sectors, et cetera. So that voice of record is super important to us from an ASCM perspective as well.
Next.
Okay. So in terms of the overview of what this assessment entails, so first off, there's 7 key SCOR process areas, and all of those are included in the assessment. And those are the things that Emily was mentioning earlier: the plan, order, source, transform, fulfill, return, orchestrate. Those are the 7 major areas that are in the assessment. What we did is we took those 7 areas, we looked across the SCOR model, and we identified 27 focus areas. So there's essentially 27 questions in the assessment. There's a set of demographics questions, and then there's 27 core questions around your supply chain in the assessment. And each of those questions correlates to one of these focus areas. So for example, under plan, S&OP is a focus area. Under source, strategic sourcing is a focus area. So there is a question associated with each of these focus areas. And in a minute, I'll give you an example of what those questions look like. So as Emily mentioned, this is all online, right? So the idea is that this is a Qualtrics survey. Anyone that wants to take the assessment can go to the link and take the assessment. Now, the way that the assessment is taken varies, and it depends on the company and what makes sense for the company, right? So some companies like to do it where we have a small group of people come together, maybe having a chapter facilitate that. And then you get a consensus set of inputs that go into the assessment. For other organizations, they like to have it a little more disseminated, right? Where maybe you have the head of planning, the head of sourcing, the head of fulfillment, all wanting to take the assessment. Maybe they take it separately and you want to see an aggregated set of results. We can do that too. But the important thing to remember is this is a qualitative assessment. So the results are only as good as the knowledge of the people taking the assessment. So it's super important to have the right people in the organization take the assessment, because it does get in depth around the processes. And if you don't have the knowledge of the processes in your organization, it's not going to be super meaningful. So again, when you look at the focus areas and some specific examples, I think you'll get a better sense for that.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Nisha, I would agree with that, because I think that the other thing that happens is sometimes we're siloed, right? We know a lot about sourcing and procurement or planning or order customer service, but not all of those things together. So to your comment, I know, and it could be kind of a team building event. My recommendation would be to have a point person who kind of knows who all the right people are in the organization that are the subject matter experts, and like have a little bit of debate and discussion on each of the questions too. I think there's a lot of value in that, and you'll get a better result.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. So depending on the form, the way that the assessment is taken, we put 2 hours here. That's really an average. If you are going to have like everyone in the room, a facilitated session, that may be more like a half day. If you're going to disaggregate it and have like individual people taking it, then that might be 30 minutes a person, right? So really, it depends on how you do the assessment. But regardless of how it's done, once the once the inputs are provided, on the back end, ASCM will take those inputs and will create a customized output briefing. We'll deliver that to the chapter, and then the chapter will provide that to the client organization. So they can work with you on any additional insights from the assessment, areas for improvement, how do we get started on this journey, et cetera. So that's kind of the process here. The other thing I would mention is that this assessment has a level 1 to 5 rating for each of the focus areas. And that level 1 to 5 roughly correlates to kind of ASCM scale that we use for CSCP or CTSC, some of our certification programs, where level 1 is reactive, kind of least mature, level 5 being most mature for each of these areas. So go ahead. So without further ado, here are the 27 areas that are assessed in this maturity assessment. And what you see to the right of each of the areas in the parenthetical, that's the SCOR reference. So that's the SCOR process that this area is derived from. So if you're interested, you can go back to the SCOR model and kind of learn more about that specific process area. So as you can see, this does look at the end-to-end supply chain. The other thing you'll notice is we are heavy on the orchestrate side, and that is definitely by design. You know, based on the work that ASCM has done in the past, a lot of the deficiencies, a lot of the breakdowns in the supply chain are happening from an orchestrate perspective. So we want to make sure that that perspective is well embedded into this assessment. The other thing I would mention is that depending on the company, you may have multiple supply chains. This particular assessment should be done at a supply chain level. So, Boeing, classic example, we have a supply chain for space. We have a supply chain for commercial airplanes. We have a supply chain for spare parts. All of those have very different characteristics, and you wouldn't want to do this assessment across all three. You would want to have a separate assessment for each of those unique supply chains to make sure that we're really capturing the essence of the supply chain and we can zero in on the specific issues for that supply chain. All right, next slide. So I won't belabor this. This is just details on what's in each level. You can read this when we send out the slides. Go ahead. All right, so here's an example. So this is an actual question in the assessment, and all the questions basically follow this format. So this is the question for S&OP. And the question is, which of the following best describes the S&OP process in your supply chain? All of them follow that format. So under sourcing, strategic sourcing, it will be which of the following best describes the strategic sourcing process in your supply chain. So all 27 follow that format. Similarly, for all 27 items, you'll be given the level and a description of that maturity level. So what does it mean to be a level 1 maturity for S&OP? What does it mean to be level 2, et cetera? The intent is that you can relatively quickly find yourself amongst these 5 levels. And the idea is also we want to be conservative, right? So if you have elements of level 2 and elements of level 3, then we really need to be conservative and consider ourselves a level 2 because we haven't met all the criteria for level 2 to move to level 3. So that's essentially how the scoring is done. These are the types of questions you'll get, and this is the level of detail you'll have to get into in terms of scoring yourselves in this assessment. Next slide. These are some output examples. So you can see at a high level, you'll get a view of where your organization lands from a top 7 process view: plan, order, source, transform, et cetera. You'll get views on where you land for each of the 27 process areas. And then the bottom right, another interesting one is the deep dive view. So the deep dive view will basically show you what your current maturity level is, the description of that current maturity level, and what are some things to consider to get to that next level of maturity. So this will all be kind of part of your package of output results. All right, and then we talked a little about this, but really the impact is that this is your starting point for further analysis. I mean, there's a ton more that can be done based on these results, but you kind of need a starting point, and that's what this provides. It can also help you with your talent discussions, with your technology investment discussions, but most importantly, just kind of giving you a vector of where to start from your transformation perspective. Go ahead. Some scoping considerations. We talked about some of these, but I think the big ones here are really understanding who is going to take the assessment and making sure that you're looking at the right supply chain segment, that you scope it to a supply chain segment and you stick with that. I think those are kind of the 2 big things you have to keep in mind when you do this assessment.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's about it for the maturity assessment.
Yeah, are there any questions, or John, can you think of anything that might be interesting to share from the one that we've done here?
It's certainly an interesting concept, and I've done these for other things. The only thing that I struggle with always is being kind of hard on myself or hard on the company. And so my only kind of input would be, don't take half of it with one person who's hard on the company and the other person who's kind of optimistic, so that it just makes everything kind of disjointed. But recognize, the people who took this are being hard on themselves or hard on the company to drive some improvements. And as Nisha pointed out, when you've got, we're in between 2 and 3, pick yourself a 2, but don't think because there was one instance 4 years ago where we weren't there that we have to call ourselves a 2. So don't be too hard on yourselves, but you're going to get more improvement if you score on the lower end. And then, as you pointed out, the example, things you can be working on, if those aren't appropriate because you were too hard on yourselves, then give yourself a break.
William?
Yes. I would say thank you, Nisha, for the knowledge you've given to me. Actually, I've seen SCOR, but I've not really paid attention to it like today. So thank you. So my understanding is it's broad, right? Because sometimes it even talks about Six Sigma and then Lean. So it means the SCOR has to be designed based on your company, because it's very broad. Because different companies, like you were giving an example about Boeing, so different companies and different design. So I really like it. That is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, William. Michael?
Yeah, a question maybe for the individuals that have walked customers through this process. So I'm just kind of curious if you've ever found any commonalities, kind of when reviewing these processes. Are there some kind of themes that you're finding inefficiencies, kind of like inefficiencies with companies, so to speak?
If you want, I can take that. So just looking at the results across, so we've had about 65 companies so far go through this and that we have results for. I would say kind of the main themes, we did an average of where are we rating ourselves in terms of maturity? Most companies are around 2.5. In addition, I would say the biggest weaknesses tend to be in the planning side of the house. And also, and I know sustainability is coming up, so I'm teeing this up for Fernanda, also around ESG and circular economy. Those tend to be kind of the weakest areas that we're seeing so far.
I would echo the planning piece. That seems to be the most immature and the toughest graded across the board.
Yes.
To Emily's point from earlier, there's a part of me that wonders if the people taking it are often the planning side. And so maybe we're harder on ourselves in the planning than in something else. It's an interesting situation.
I think there's some validity to that. I think a lot of times the people that step up to say, hey, we need a maturity assessment are the planning people, because they kind of see that broader impact and not being able to have adequate planning. So I definitely can see some of that.
Brian?
Hopefully you can hear me tonight, but thanks to Nisha. How are you handling data privacy as it relates to that you're collecting all this information?
Did you catch that, Nisha? Data, how does ASCM handle the data privacy as they're capturing this information?
Right. So in terms of data privacy, so none of your personal data is really captured. What is captured is the answer to the questions that we've provided for a company perspective. So that information is not shared across other companies. Any data that we would share would be aggregated results across an industry sector or across multiple industries. So no individual identifying information is shared through this process.
Does that answer your question, Brian? Okay, great. Okay, so I think we're pretty good on time. Fernanda, I'm gonna have you go ahead and introduce yourself and then take us.
The last one, sorry. Nisha, so what's the difference between the SCOR and the supply chain framework?
So SCOR is a supply chain framework.
Oh, it's the same thing. Okay.
So I would say there may be other frameworks out there. SCOR is a framework, and I would say it's probably the most utilized framework.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. It's kind of the global standard. It's been around for a long time. Yeah. Okay, Fernanda, go ahead. You can introduce yourself and then we'll get into your slides.
Okay, so hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Fernanda de Belém. Similar to Nisha, I am the Sustainability Transformation Architect, Solutions Architect for ASCM. So I'm based out of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I also manage our partner network from Latin America. And I also handle a couple of accounts and manage the Global Health Initiative. So my days are never bored. So I have a multitude of cool things to work with, but I'm super excited to be here with you today to talk about sustainability and our sustainability assessment, and giving you a heads up and thank you, Nisha, ahead of time, because these are kind of twin assessments. So most of what you've heard in terms of how you take it, like having a group of people, the size, 27 focus area for maturity, sustainability is 30 questions. The length is also about the same, between 1 hour to 1.5 hours. So we try to make it harmonized between the two assessments to make it easy and even comparable. So some of it you've heard before, so I'm not going to repeat it. And if you have any particularities, I'll bring it up. So next, Emily, thank you. Yeah, so why invest in maturity in sustainability assessment, right? With so many problems around our supply chains, maturity, planning, resilience. So why sustainability for now? So the first thing everyone knows, so, oh my God, I need to do something on sustainability. There is that heartfelt things for us as individuals that want to address sustainability, but there's also, where should I start? This is so broad. Maybe my company does not support. I don't have a strong sponsor for it. I don't even know. And it's like boiling the ocean because there's so many things. So these types of simple assessments, like the one I'll be presenting, is a good way to start to take a picture of your as-is state. Because there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much to be covered when we talk about sustainability, that one can be intimidated and do nothing, which is not a good option. Or if we can piecemeal it, at least try to have a picture to understand where you are, it's already a great step, believe me, even compared to other companies with technically higher maturity levels. So the first big thing is know how you are, know where your sustainability state is. So this will already give you an indication. Then it will try to help you piecemeal it. So where should I start focusing? Where is sustainability hardest on my company? Do I have any sustainability strategy at all? Or does it just stays into environment? I don't look at my supply chain. So an assessment like this will start giving you indications on where to start. From there, the other good thing is when you do these, you can come back in 1-2 years and see how progress you've made. So you can capture progression over time. Doesn't mean your picture is static. So we want to progress, even though we know it's something hard, but anything that moves the needle is already worth it. And then you can see the results out of it, because it's undeniable. It may take a while. Sometimes there's investment associated to it. But, when you think about renewables, when you think about efficiencies and other things like waste reduction consumption of water, for example, other things, even though it's not our intention, it will go back into cost savings and initiatives as well. Even though that was not your priorities, being more sustainable will give you that back to you as a bonus, the cost saving as well. And you can also be on top of risk mitigation. You have a better view of your supply chain, because you'll be looking to your suppliers. What are your suppliers doing? I mean, Do I have suppliers that work with children to, for example, maybe tier 3 suppliers from one of your, and I'm making this up now, which is something that actually happens, that works with one of your manufacturers for flavoring, for example, is collecting flowers from Africa using child, and you are not aware of this. So this will start instigating you to think about things that we stay in our box. Tier 1 suppliers, this is my world, and when you expand it, you see how much you're exposed to risks as well, not only for supplier risk, for shortages, but also reputational, ethical, and other sorts of risks. And also, if your company has a strategic reporting or strategic ambition of reporting or having sustainability reporting, when you're doing those types of assessment, and the ASM assessment particularly, it is aligned to the SDG goals, to the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is something that will help out as well when you're talking about reporting, what are the things that the supply chain people are doing that helps the SDGs that my company is already pledging and advocating from. So all of these little things, you can gather from a sustainability assessment. Next, Emily, thanks. Yeah, so just giving a background, again, piggybacking on Nisha, and I'm glad she already gave you guys a heads up on what is SCOR. So our sustainability assessment also is based on the SCOR model, because this is how we define supply chain. So we'll see how we have organized it by the key supply chain processes. Also, another source is our ASCM sustainability standards. I'll put that in the chat in a minute. This is also free for you to download. It is also a model, another supply chain model, but based on sustainability, that has a description of the processes in light of the triple bottom line, and I'll get to that to a second. And these standards are also aligned, to the sustainability goals, the UN SDG. So we have these three working together. So we drew from the SCOR model. We have a sustainability standards, which are aligned to the SDGs. So we want to make something relevant at a global level, not something, oh, this is an ASM. No, this is global because it is aligned to global frameworks that companies actually report on. It also provides a top-level view of what are the sustainability maturity of your processes and supply chain processes, which is really the differentiation from our assessment, and to help you focus on the transformation efforts. It covers what we call the triple bottom line. It's classically defined as people, profit, and planet, but in other words, it's how do you operate generating value? They call it profit, but it's value, prosperity, making sure you don't harm the world. So taking into consideration the environment and the communities and the people that you operate. So when we look into supply chains and everything that we are assessing, how do I do all of those things in the supply chain, taking care of the people that we work with and the planet, and still generating efficiency and value? So this is the backbone of our assessment. And then similar to maturity, we'll have also formal output briefing that summarize the findings, next steps, what are the opportunities, low scores, high scores, super similar to maturity as well. Next, Emily. Yeah, so this is how we describe maturity. We use the same grading from all of the ASM assessments, 1 to 5, 1 being the least mature, 5 being the most mature. I won't read all of these, of course, but I wanted to point out how does that relate to sustainability when we're talking about, a level 1 supply chain, a level 1 maturity, sustainable supply chain. What does that mean? So companies that are on level 1, it's really at the awareness level. So they know that there are certain awareness that things should be done, but sustainability is still a cost. So they use sustainability as a cost. At a level 2, there begins to be some awareness that know what sustainability is. There are some practices, but they are really wanting to just do the minimum to be compliant. So they just want to really deliver the basics. There's nothing after. I'll just do what I'm required by compliance. At level 3, organizations start to figure out that there can be cost savings and efficiencies drawn out of sustainability into the supply chain on ways things could be done better, more streamlined. So they're starting seeing the cost savings and the payback from sustainability, especially into cost when you talk about renewables and also risks and other exposures as well. At a level 4, this is really when we see that sustainability is part of their strategy, is integrated, it comes from top down, and then it all flows much better because you have a strategic guidance to it. And at level 5 are really those companies that are thought leaders that are, leading the industry in new things and setting the pace for being sustainable. They talk with governments, NGOs, and they're setting the pace for sustainability. It differs a little bit when we think about process maturity. So when we think about sustainability, it's how they bring that concept into their company, into the supply chain. Next. Yeah, and these are the focus areas for the sustainability assessment, slightly different from, from the focus areas for maturity from SCOR. So we have the areas from the triple bottom line. So I'll begin from here, from the middle green, which is the ethical and social excellence. So these are traditional aspects. Then when you look into a supply chain, when you think how ethical it is from that standpoint, you think about human rights and labor practices, anti-corruption, codes of conduct, minimum wage, training, and child labor. So these are classic things that are available in other frameworks as well. So this is the social part and social and ethical part of it. When we talk about environment, this is also classic, right? So when we're thinking about how sustainable is from an environmental standpoint, is about energy and consumption, waste management, how to manage your waste, what is the type of materials you use, is it virgin material, do you use recycled or not? Greenhouse gas emissions, another classic that we have a big contribution to in scopes 1, 2, and 3, supply chain scope 3 as a primarily emissions from this. Also product life cycle and circular supply chain management. These are all things that we see normally when we think about sustainability, but the really differentiation that ASCM brings to the table is how to look into supply chain and those eyes. And these are the 4 big SCOR processes, supply chain processes, according to the SCOR model. Is still on your version, Emily. So this is still in version before we had the transform. So it is the plan, source, make, deliver, and return. And so we'll be looking to those processes in like, how do I do, for example, my supply network planning? Do I consider how much emissions will I have from my supply network when I design it? Do I consider if I'll need to remove a preserved area when I put in a warehouse to be able to be on my perfect spot for my hub that gives me the least amount of lead time and efficient cost? So all of those things, and again, this is an extreme example. So when we do those things that we do every day, do we only think about cost and speed, or do I think about, will this have an impact into the environment and the people that I work with? These are the 2 new variables that fundamentally we'll be asking ourselves every time we think about a supply chain process. When I choose my transportation mode, do I think how much that will emit? When I do my supplier research, do I see if these people are buying, or they have tier 2 or 3 suppliers that come from countries without any regulation or any policy that protects the people that are working with? So it is a change in mindset, because we are not really taught about this in school, right? We always about cost, efficiency, how do I deliver? And now we're bringing something else to the table that maybe not the most comfortable, may add another layer of work, but at the end of not of the day, of the ages, this is something that we need to consider if we want to thriving as humanity, thinking about the future, how we do these things with more consciousness for the environment and the people. I know we can all figure out how to be efficient, right? It's the 2 other variables that are kind of always missing. So when we look into these areas, we'll be looking to those processes within plan, within source, within make and deliver and return, in light of the environment, in light of efficiency as well, and in light of how do we deal with communities and people that we work with. So this is really what differentiates us from the other regular standards and even reporting mechanisms, like you're familiar with the GRI and others that will do it beautifully with the social and environmental part, but not a deeper dive into supply chain like what we're trying to do here. Next. Yeah, and then also showing you an example. So you also be getting a Qualtrics link similar to maturity, and we make reference to the SCOR model. So it is, most of them are not only processes but best practice. So you see the BPs, the coding for best practice. So we try to map it to the SCOR and then to the sustainability standard. And then you have an options of questions from level 1 to level 5. And you try to see yourself, well, what do you fit in? And for each of those areas that I showed on the previous slide, you get an answer like this. So please select the option that best describes your supply chain lean plan. So some companies may say, I don't even have a lean plan. Some others may just have a lean plan without embedding environment and social. Others may have environmental and social as a key part of their lean plan. So that will vary, and you select it. And then similar to maturity, we'll have a score behind it. Next, Emily. Yeah, and these are the following slides are examples of the output. So you go through all of those 30 questions, we'll compile everything in the back end, and we'll start, we'll provide you with the readout. So this is an example of what the chapter would engage with you, the type of data that we'll be providing to you. So you would have first your full results. So this particular ABC company was 1.8. And I can go ahead and share with you that most companies that have done these are between 1 and 2. We haven't had a full 3 yet. So this is where they stand. You would know, as in a high level, so where was the lowest score for this particular company was a 1.42. So environment was where they had the lowest score, and supply chain was where they had the highest score. Next. And then from there, we'll start, chopping all that amount of information. So this is a first view of the dashboard. So we'll see how we scored in each of those areas, how much you scored in plan, in source, in deliver, fulfill, and make, environmental and social. And we'll be able to see where your score is the lowest, so that we can have some idea. So from where do we start, right? Next, Emily. Yeah, and then we try to organize it. So where were my lowest ones? So we will not be able to boil the oceans. So what are my low-hanging fruits? What are the things that I should pay attention the most? So for this particular company, we can see a lot of ones in the environmental aspect of it, in waste management, in greenhouse, so all of the classic things. But also, if we think about supply chain, a lot on the sourcing side. So they didn't have a lot of accountability of where they were sourcing from, which is a risk exposure for them for sure. Next. Yeah, and then from there, when we provide these readouts, we will be pointing out where to start. What maybe would be your low-hanging fruits, given all that amount of data, so we try to go one by one and provide these types of insights. Next. I think that was the last one. Yeah, and we always, regardless, as an association, as supply chain professional educators that we try to be, we always recommend doing our sustainability class. The chapter also offers it. It is called Building a Sustainable Supply Chain, that, for teams that don't know where to start, it is a great resource. So we always recommend at the end, get your supply chain team prepared so that they know what a sustainable supply chain looks like, to try to have some reference and start embedding new practices. So it is tailored for supply chain professionals. We'll go process by process and discuss how to embed sustainability of them. And the learning objectives are really on the application of those concepts into the supply chain, learn how to use the standards and to apply them into their context. So this is a call to action to everyone, for every company that does the assessment. When you start with education, your team, to make sure everyone is on the same page and you're able to bring in all those new practices, redesigning process, educating others within the company. And because it is a journey, it's a long journey. Yes, I think that was my last one.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Fernanda, I was just going to say, what a great suggestion, right? Because this is kind of a space, like, if you don't really know it, if you don't work in quality or sustainability, there's a ton of stuff in here. I'm thinking I might do the class because there's a ton of stuff in here I'd love to learn. So great offering, great call out there.
Yes, I think that was the last one, Emily, from my side, and we can open for questions. Yeah.
guys have any questions?
Yes, I like this. I like. Hi, Fernanda and William.
Hi, William.
So, I source more food service packaging. Right. So sustainability is something that I really like because sometimes customers will ask for FDA approved on some of the food service packaging, and then we need to make sure it is sustainable to the environment. So, I mean, a lot of companies don't pay attention to sustainability, but I think it's getting a momentum where companies are now paying attention to sustainability because of the environment. So this is something I think is good. A lot of companies should pay attention to. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, William.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine from the packaging industry, the types of materials that will go to your packaging, where they're sourcing, what their origin, if they are from renewable, non-renewable, the energy. Yeah, there's a ton to unpack there. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael?
Yeah, maybe just not so much a question, just wanted to comment that the sustainability piece. So, I just wanted to say in a former role, I managed about a dozen reverse logistics programs. So we would leverage tools such as this heavily because you find there's a significant amount of waste that happens. But there's huge solutions that are out there. So I wanted just to give a couple of examples of things that I used with former customers previously. Like there's a company, William, you mentioned the packaging part. I know there was a company called Synthica, and they're still out there. They're relatively new, but they have these, quite frankly, machines for food and beverage waste that can extract energy units out of the waste. So I know that's one big solution that's kind of come up. And then there's, ITAD companies that can extract the valuable raw materials from a lot of the electronics that are out there. And there's even a company, I'm trying to think if I remember the name of it, not off the top of my head, but there's one guy that I know that he can turn certain hazardous materials into industrial floor cleaner. Now, certain hazardous materials, of course, but I guess my point being is, there are solutions out there to be sustainable, and there's a ton of EOL or end of life opportunities for companies. So certainly, Fernanda, appreciate you sharing this information.
Awesome. Thanks for your comment, Michael. Yeah, this is also my area of passion, circular supply chain management, which you're describing. It's clear circularity. Let's not deviate anything to landfills. Let's collect, reuse, we do the whole thing. Yeah, this is the mindset.
Excellent. Okay, well, we have 5 minutes left. I love to give time back if I can. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll take a quick pause. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So what we will do is I will send out the slide deck to those of you who participated on the call today. I think we have a plan also for sending out or for somehow figuring out a way to post the video or the recording in a way that it doesn't take up your entire inbox. So more to come there.
Yeah.
John, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, the recording, we will work on getting the recording out onto the chapter's YouTube channel. So we won't be sending the recording out, and we will put the slides there as well. I think we can send a PDF of the slides, but they'll also be with the recording. So look for that. We'll be sending out a little notice once we get that done.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, I'm guessing we'll post the video to LinkedIn.
Once we get it, we will put it out on a link to it on LinkedIn.
Yes.
A lot of links there.
Link to it on LinkedIn. Fabulous. So thank you everybody for your time today over the lunch hour. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or would like to put your team through any of these assessments. Again, I think it's fairly quick and painless, and it's free. So it's kind of like a low risk thing to do, right? You're going to learn something and it's free. High benefit, low cost. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend wherever you are, and hope to see you at a future one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, take care.